Welcome to Take a Seat, where we sit down with experts on a wide range of topics related to the science of human flourishing. I'm your host, Dr. Nick Holton. I'm a coach, consultant, and speaker in the field of optimal human functioning. Whether you're someone trying to build your best self or a better community, we've got something for you, so take a seat. Hello, friends. Welcome back in. This week, we took a seat and chatted with Akinwole Garrett. Aki is a man of many interests and has his hands in a slew of really incredible projects. He's a senior business development executive with Lenovo by day, and by night, the founder and CEO of IMAGIN, a minority-owned diversified media company focused on film, television, and digital content production, which has produced multiple films, one of which has been shown at prestigious film festivals like Sundance. He does all of this while working to be a loving husband, father, son, and sibling to a large and equally incredible family. Aki and I chatted about the primary motivation that fuels him to take on so much, what he calls his insatiable desire to drive impact and make a contribution, along with his strategies for synergizing these efforts so that he can be his best self both mentally and physically in both his personal and professional lives. Aki is a really incredible human being with an inspiring story and outlook on life, and I absolutely loved chatting with him about how he flourishes and tries to help others do the same. So here it is, my conversation with the awesome Akinwole Garrett.
Hey, good morning, Nick.
Hey, what's up, Aki? I was just checking to see if maybe you were on.
No, I was going through hair and makeup. So
Gotcha. Do you do your own, or wife, kids take care of it for you, or?
I hired a professional this morning to come in.
Good for you. All right, nice.
I wish. No, it's all me.
That's awesome. Do you at least, run the approval process through somebody after hair and makeup, or?
Absolutely. I tell my wife, how'd I look? Side profile, front profile, boom. Good. All right, let's make it happen.
What was her feedback this morning?
She liked it. She liked the shirt. She was like, I haven't seen you in a button-down shirt in God knows how long. So I'm really enjoying this look. She was quite impressed. She was like, you look good. The shirt's really nice. It's crisply dry clean. So she was impressed.
We are honored. little
Nick,
old us.
Nick. I don't do this often, okay? You got a special place in my heart.
I appreciate it, man. I'm pumped. I appreciate it. So
awesome.
Okay, let's start with some of the various projects you're a part of. Can you share with us a little bit about the various things you're into more on the professional side of your life?
Sure. So by day, my focus is running our global strategic telco alliances at Lenovo, which is the largest PC manufacturer in the world. We control something like 26% of the market share. And for us, the telco vertical is a new vertical. It's a place where we have not traditionally had alliances and strategic partnerships with telcos. And that's primarily because the footprint of devices that we've manufactured has primarily been Wi-Fi enabled. And now that things are moving to a 5G, and there's a lot of benefits that far exceed the benefits of Wi-Fi, we've started to build out those partnerships with the likes of Verizon, T-Mobile, and so forth here in North America, and then globally with a list of tier one telco carriers that will allow us to really take our connected devices that can use and should use mobile operator network connectivity for the internet to transfer data and so forth. Now that we have those devices and 5G is really pushing the boundaries, it's a space where we see a lot of opportunity. So that's why I spend my days really building those partnerships out, and nights, shall I say. Have a lot of late calls with Asia.
Sure.
And so forth. But that's really kind of my focus is really building those out. And it's been interesting because it's, like I said, it didn't exist before I got to Lenovo. I've had to kind of start from laying the first brick and kind of building it brick by brick into an actual business. And then I moonlight as a couple of things. Kind of in the board world, I sit on two boards, or one board, one council. I'm on the board of the Fuqua Minority Alumni Advisory Board, which is for Duke University's Business School, where I attended from 2009 to 2011.
I don't know if we've talked about this, but I'm a Spartan, so I'm trying not to hold the Duke thing against you as we have this conversation. But
Go Sparty.
yeah,
I guess if I went to Michigan, that'd be worse.
well, you're right. It would be worse. As I always tell
Yeah.
people, I only deal with one Wolverine, and it's the one I married. So
I love that. I love that. I love that.
anyway, sorry. So you're on this board for Duke, and they're
Yeah. So I'm on the Future Minority Alumni Advisory Board for Duke, where we help support the students of color, current students of color at Fuqua that are enrolled. So we kind of serve as a liaison and a support network of alums to those students, helping them push forward initiatives, helping them with job opportunities, helping them with internship opportunities, helping them think about ways to impact the school, and also helping Fuqua think about how do you reach and continue to foster your relationships with your minority alumni, particularly Black and Latino alumni at Fuqua. So I've been on that board for about a year, and a bit over a year, about a year and a half now, coming up on 2. And it's been really rewarding. I've enjoyed it. I love my business school experience. It was very, very pivotal in my career and in my life. I met my wife there and so forth. And then I also am on the Shipley Alumni Council, which is a more recent development. Been on the Alumni Council now, I'm going to say, for about 4 months or so. And that's been good to get back re-engaged with Shipley. I had been on the Alumni Council many, many years ago when I was closer to the Philadelphia area. I was actually living in New York, and I was on the Alumni Council. But then I went back to business school, and kind of life took over, and I kind of stepped away. But it's been good to re-engage with Shipley. It's been really, really fun, especially in light of all that's happened at Shipley since I was on the Alumni Council and since I attended Shipley and all that's happened in the world. I think it's now a good time for me to kind of re-engage and bring some a different perspective, an additional perspective to the group and to the school in general. One of the other things I do kind of in more of an entrepreneurial world and kind of scratching the entrepreneurial itch is I sit on the board, the investment committee of Resilient Ventures, which is a Durham, North Carolina based VC fund that focuses on investing in Black entrepreneurs. As we all know, entrepreneurship is the underpinning of the American economy. It's a great way to build wealth. And there's a huge disparity in terms of the amount of funding that goes to Black and brown startup founders vis-a-vis non-Black and brown startup founders. And so Resilient is really seeking to address that disparity, and has a national focus, or a national kind of footprint, in terms of they will look at Black and brown founders anywhere Black founders specifically anywhere in North America. But obviously, a core of that, a large core that comes in Southeast, where also you kind of see outside of Atlanta, you see a lack of capital flowing to Black entrepreneurs. So those are kind of some of the interesting things I do. And then the last thing I'll mention, and probably the more fun and more challenging thing that I do, because it's not necessarily a space where I am traditionally trained, is in the film space. My late brother, who passed away a few years back, was a filmmaker before he passed in 2000. He passed in 2016. Before he passed in 2007, we did a film together, a short film called A Nick in Time, that was in Sundance, Tribeca, and Cannes film festivals, and about an additional 10 film festivals, which was kind of my baptism by fire into the world of film. And then in 2012, we came back and shot this film. You can actually probably see a little bit of the film poster called American Falls. And that one got into like Venice and a few other film festivals, Toronto, and a few other film festivals around the world. And that debuted in 2013. And then, we were working on a project around the time that he passed away. That project still exists. I had shelved it until probably a year and a half ago. I shelved it because of just getting over the grief and the trauma of losing him. We were very, very, very close. But I've since re-engaged because I've made part of my life's mission to make sure that his name gets up on the big screen and gets major distribution, because that's always been his dream. That was always his dream. So back working on another project now. It's highly, it's a well-known Philadelphia story. It is hopefully, it's in the social justice space. So hopefully we can make that story happen here in the near future. Actively working on it. So yeah, man, it's exciting. I do a lot, I guess, kind of all over the place. It kind of seems scattered, but for me, I like to be engaged. I like to be challenged. I like to try new things. So that's
For sure. Yeah. It does sound like a lot, which is awesome. I'm sure it's a lot of fun. I'm sure it's rewarding. I want to get into a little bit of sort of your why behind that, maybe later in the conversation. But for now, I want to kind of take this head on. So, part of the reason we wanted to have this chat with you is you're doing so many really incredible things on many different levels. I think for various constituency groups. And, we're talking about flourish in here. So the question in my mind very generally is kind of like, how do you go about this? But maybe we'll break this down a little bit. And can you tell me just a bit about kind of your mindset as you take these very things on and sort of, how you operate maybe on a cognitive level around this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, it's always been about, challenging myself. It's always been about, I'm the youngest of 7 kids, right? And I grew up in South Philadelphia and, at a time where, most of my peers didn't get an opportunity to go to a place like a Shipley, right? So for me, I've kind of seen both sides of the coin, right? I've seen, the plight of urban America, and I've seen the wealth and success of America as well, and been exposed to both. And so for me, I've always been kind of intrinsically driven to want to achieve. I've also, I'd be remiss if I didn't, point out the fact that, my mother, who was a single mother, it was, is and was a major inspiration and influence on me. Just seeing my mother's dedication and hard work day in and day out. I don't ever remember my mother calling out, sick for work. She was a school teacher in Philadelphia in the public school system. I don't ever remember her missing a day of work. Just her relentlessness. Every morning she got up and made lunch for at no period of time did she make lunch for less than 3 people. Bag lunch for less than 3 people. And I'm not talking about like pre-made, like prefabbed and already made food that she just throws into a bag. I'm talking about like fresh made sandwiches, snacks and so forth. Every single day. I think we tried to tally it up amongst the 7 of us. And I think she made somewhere over like 300,000 lunches over the course of raising kids for 12 years from kindergarten to 12th grade. But just having her as an inspiration, and then being the youngest of 7, I've got a number of older siblings who have been very, very, very inspirational. They push me, right? They push me. I was awarded an opportunity to go to Shipley, and I took that as a mandate / a challenge / a responsibility to achieve. I took it as an opportunity to really put myself on a path that I thought would be beneficial long term. And so, when I think about all these things that I do, I think about them as, how do I drive impact, right? How do I make an impact in the world, right? And everything that I'm doing is in some way, shape, or form going to impact the next kind of generation or the next iteration of whatever I'm working on. So whether it's Lenovo and trying to build out, a strategy and work with, telco carriers, that's going to impact how people work. That's going to impact how people learn. That's going to impact how people interact with technology, right? And how people leverage technology going forward, because we're on the cutting edge of a new mobile technology. We're on the cutting edge of new equipment technology, right? And so how do we use this for good? With COVID and things like that, we've seen a massive shift in people working from anywhere and learning from anywhere. And then, when I look at things I'm doing in the film space or the films that we've done, my brother and I, were films that had a lot of social commentary kind of embedded in them, right? And it made people think, right, about race, about class, about preconceived notions, about perception, about prejudice, about, all those things, because we set up scenarios in our films that really tease those types of scenarios out. And we didn't answer for the audience. We kind of left the audience to answer for themselves. How would you respond? How would you react? How would you think in this type of situation? And so, again, trying to have an impact on people's psyche and how they think about these issues and create conversations. As a matter of fact, my brother's first film, A Nick in Time, became a part of a curriculum for a few different universities because of the style and the way in which it was told. It really generated a lot of conversation around issues of race and issues of judgment and perception. And so, again, just hearing that and seeing that film live beyond, kind of live forever and be used in different arenas to help impact students in the way they think and be a topic of discussion. Again, it just warms my heart knowing that, again, I'm having an impact. And then in the world of entrepreneurship, I think I just mentioned that there's never been a pipeline problem for Black entrepreneurs. There's been a funding issue and a funding disparity for Black entrepreneurs. And so, and it's well studied. If we can find ways to fund more Black entrepreneurs, create more wealth, and you'll begin to close the wealth gap in a very, very significant way. And so being a part of an organization that literally is putting capital at a very early stages, seed stage and early A stage for Black entrepreneurs, to me is very, very, very impactful. And so, again, driving impact, creating change, creating difference.
It's interesting you bring this up, and you mentioned specifically intrinsic motivation. And hopefully you don't mind me saying, but I run this alumni series, which you've attended a couple times, and we have one next week. We're going to be talking very deeply about motivation, and specifically intrinsic motivation. And academically speaking, one of the core components that tends to really drive or really make up intrinsic motivation is what we call purpose. And purpose is really, generally speaking, like a contribution to something maybe more significant than just our individual self, right? It's got an element of self-transcendence. And I think that's what I hear in basically every single thing that you're a part of. And I see you shaking your head, right, agreeing. My question is why? What do you think? What do you think led to that? I'm sure it's a variety of variables, but not everyone out in the world is kind of saying like, how can I drive impact? How can I sort of make a contribution to the greater good? Where do you think that comes from for you?
I can trace it directly to one person, one institution. My parents and my parents separated when I was very young, but my father still stayed in my life, still is in my life. My mother, however, because she was the parent that was always around, my mother was always very giving. She ran a nonprofit in Philadelphia. She always, for as long as I can remember during my childhood, she ran a nonprofit. She offered tutoring services. We used to go to the YWCA on Christian Street in Philadelphia, which I don't even know if it exists anymore. And she ran a tutoring program out of there. She ran other educational programs out of that building. And she had an office there. And this was in addition to her day job as a teacher. She used to tutor students. She tutored one student. I'll never forget. His name was Walter. Walter was Down syndrome. But Walter actually became a very, very close family friend of ours. Like Walter treated me like a little brother. And I always remember my mom was so proud of Walter because his development from the time that she took him on as a student to the time that he became a grown man was just unbelievable, right? Given the fact that he was Down syndrome, just his development and his love and his compassion and his care for the world and for other people far exceeded, himself. And so my mom always had this history of giving. And I always watched my mom give and volunteer and do things that were in the community to help better the community, to help better those around her. And so I get part of it from her, I think, or I know. And then the other part, I think, comes from my education at Shipley. The motto, courage for the deed, grace for the doing, or courage for the deed, grace in the doing, has always stuck with me, right? Has always stuck with me. And Shipley, I think, really drilled home this notion of service, right? And as a result, I was vice president of the school. We did senior service projects. We did volunteer days at Shipley. We would make, we had that pen pals. And when we were younger, we would make things in the later years at Shipley, we would make things and send to like Children's Hospital Cancer Ward. So Shipley really fostered this sense of giving, right? And that fact that, to whom much is given, much is expected. As students at Shipley, we were privileged, right? We were privileged and we were afforded an opportunity that's not normal. Most people's parents can't afford to spend 5 figures on a child's, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade education, right? Let alone, for me, from third to 12th, and through the grace of Shipley and the scholarship program and Dr. Pilch and the financial aid office, I was able to go to Shipley for 10 years. And like I said, I'm the youngest of 7. My mother was a single parent, so she was a teacher, so clearly she couldn't afford to hack it. So I carried that. I think for me, that only increased the sensitivity in the sense of like, I am really lucky here, and the way that I show that is to pay it forward, is to pass it on and to give it to the next generation, and to use my privilege or my, the things I've been privileged to do that most people who look like me and who come from where I come from don't get an opportunity to do. It's an obligation for me to pass that on. It's an obligation for me to do things that are beyond myself, because so much was poured into me, right? That I have to now pour it into the future. And so that's really where I would say that's really where kind of where the seeds germinated. And then just over my life and, in college and professionally and socially, I've been able to just let that sense of giving flourish. And I don't do it for the accolades. I don't do it for recognition. As a matter of fact, I'm the kind of person where I prefer to be behind the scenes. I like other people to be in front of the scenes and kind of catch the spotlight. But I do it just because for me, I think there's 2 quotes that come to mind. One that I've always carried with me early on, which is service is the rent that we pay to live on this earth. And the other one is by the late Nipsey Hussle, who I, rest in peace. 2 days ago marked this 2-year anniversary of his death. He said the highest human act is to inspire. And when I heard that a few years ago, I was just blown off my feet, because I'm like, that really is when you think about it, if you can inspire somebody to be better than who they are, or to do something differently, or to achieve something they didn't think they could achieve, that is the penultimate of human existence. That's where it came from. It came from my mother, and it came from Shipley. That's where it started.
First, I mean, I just got to say, your mother sounds like an incredible woman. There's part of me that says, like, let's get her on the podcast. I mean,
Oh yeah.
school teacher,
Yeah.
single mother of 7, and doing this nonprofit and whatever quote unquote off time she had. And I can't imagine with 7 kids, there was much off time. That's really amazing. So what an example you must have had, growing up or throughout your entire life, frankly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. My mother's remarkable. I can't say enough about her. For people who know her, a lot of people in the shipping community know her, respect her, and care for her. She's the reason why I do what I do. I do what I do because of her. Times get tough, things get challenging. I get frustrated. I think about my mother, and I think about, some of the times that, we didn't own a car, and she would come out to Shipley on public transportation after having worked a full day, and it'd be pouring, raining, and she'd come to Shipley, and her feet would be wet because it's pouring, raining. She'd walk from Bryn Mawr train station to Shipley, would participate as a parent when she could, and then, we would go home. I mean, I just think about the sacrifices that she made for me. Blows my mind. I'm going to start crying if I don't stop talking about it.
No, it's all good. Yeah, it's all good. It's really incredible. And I mean, not a surprise that would, like, the language we put around that is self-efficacy, right? Like, a lot of times our confidence in our own ability to do things comes from being surrounded by other people who have maybe done those things, right? You use the word inspiration very much that way, right? Your siblings in a similar mold? Is this, like, in many ways sort of a family thing? You think a lot of, not just you, but your siblings got from your mother?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all got different parts of our mother and different parts of our father to varying degrees, as you would expect over when you explore the gene pool of having 7 children, right? In terms of, if I had to look at my siblings and say, who are the 2 most similar, or who's most similar to me, would be my brother Bay, who passed away in 2016. He and I were very close. We lived together for almost 5 years after I graduated college in Brooklyn, in Park Slope, before he went out to LA. In a different way, he had a tremendous impact on my life in terms of situational readiness and how to think through situations in real time and make optimal decisions. So when you talk about peak performance, my brother, and I think you and I chatted about this previously, there's a book called Relentless that was written by Tim Grover, who trained Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and Tiger Woods. And he talked about how they exceeded this notion of being great. They were legendary. They were not a closer, because most people think the penultimate is I'm a closer. Like I close the deal. They were a step above, which he called a cleaner, which is basically, it's hard to describe. It's beyond being a closer. It was like the game was over before it even started, kind of thing, just by their mere presence on the court or their mere presence on the golf course. Like the game, they had already beaten the competition just by their very embodiment of their presence and knowing how to execute. It's like in second nature. And so my brother, Bay, was the one who exposed me, who told me about that book. That book is a book I reference all the time. I read it all the time for inspiration. I read it all the time just to make sure that I'm course correcting my mindset. Naturally, you deviate and wander as the days go by, but it's kind of a true north in terms of staying focused on the goals, executing better, putting in the reps to make sure you execute better, whether it's playing the mental reps in your head and thinking through every permutation of a situation before you get into that situation, just being ultimately prepared for the moment is something that my brother really helped me as I was evolving from a young man into a professional. And I carry those lessons with me every day. We would sit down for hours and, in our apartment, or we go to lunch in Park Slope, or we go to the barbershop, just anywhere, talk about a lot of those things. He was 12 years older than me. So he was in his mid 30s when I was coming out of college, and imparted a lot of wisdom. But I would say he and I were probably the closest, just in terms of our thought process, our desire to give. Yeah. And then my other siblings, again, there's overlap, there's Venn diagram overlap in each one of my siblings.
So this is a good segue, I think, into a conversation about, I think, work ethic, both kind of what I might call the light side and the dark side of work ethic, and sort of how we kind of strike that balance. You're doing a lot that requires a certain degree, like you mentioned, late night calls with Asia, balancing different projects, wearing different hats. So that certainly requires a degree of, I think, perseverance and grit and just general work ethic. But there's also a balance with, like, not taking that too far. So let's maybe take those sort of one at a time. Will you talk a little bit about maybe what has informed your attitude around work ethic?
Yeah. Again, I think, my mother, just seeing her work so hard, I've just always had to work hard, right? I tell people all the time, I'm not the smartest person in the room, oftentimes, but the one thing I can control is nobody will outwork me. And
A little bit of an underdog mentality, would you say?
definitely a bit of an underdog mentality, right? I think when you operate in the spaces that I operate in, and as much as we want to believe that we are in a post-racial America, we're not. I'm oftentimes one of one in a room. It's not that I walk in the room feeling that I'm at a deficit. I just walk in the room knowing that I'm going to outwork and excel in that space. I feel like I know without a doubt I'm very intelligent, very well prepared, great pedigree. And so when I walk into a room, I don't ever doubt my abilities, but I also want to separate myself from the pack, right? I want to clearly stand out. And so one of the ways you do that is I just outwork people. I ran cross country at Shipley. Steve Prefontaine was like one of my kind of idols. Still is. Like I went to the University of Oregon. I went to Priest Corner where he actually died, where the crash happened, and there's like big rock there and everything. Like I'm a pretty big Prefontaine fan. I've read a ton of books about him and articles and things like that. I've researched him a lot and understood his philosophy. But he always had a saying that said, if it comes down to a pure guts race, then there's nobody that can beat me. And so he was willing to literally go to die to win, right? He was literally willing to go to an extreme that nobody else would go to be successful and to win. And so without being illegal, right? So I think that for me is that philosophy is always stuck in the back of my mind, which is in certain scenarios, you just got to outwork people. You just got to outwork people. I want to be empty when it's all said and done. I want to have given all that I could give to life, to my family, to my work, to God. I probably should say that in a better order: to God, to family, to work.
So, well, it's interesting you bring that up because our first conversation we chatted about this a little bit, but so you bring up Prefontaine and this idea of I'll go on the verge of death, really, to sort of like push this work ethic and have this sort of like guttural kind of grit. And that in many ways, I think, especially in American culture, that we can romanticize that. But also you don't actually want to work yourself to death, right? You have a sense of this balance. And I think our initial conversation, you talked about, and this is probably a good opportunity, if you don't mind, to go into a little bit more about what happened with your brother. But a shift from what it sounded like was, I don't know if you describe yourself as a workaholic, but certainly a really hard worker. And I think you told me kind of work, family, God. And after the tragedy that occurred with your brother, it really flipped more to God, family, work.
Bingo. Yeah, no, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And that was when I was, before I started having children, and I was, out of undergrad and then out of business school in my early 30s. I was very, very focused on like career. That was always about to me, career and climbing the corporate ladder. I was in investment banking, and I wanted to, make gobs of money, and that's what it was. That's what the focus was on, right? And then I got married, started having children. My brother passed away in 2016, and I had just had my second child, my second daughter. It hit me like a ton of bricks. And, I'll never forget at his funeral, there was no short of probably 800 people, 500, 800 people attended his funeral. And there was only one person and he had worked over in May there. He was an executive producer, a senior producer, some high-ranking producer at Ogilvy and May there for 15 years. He'd worked at other production companies and was very, very well regarded. You could count the number of black male producers, black producers one, but black male producers on one hand in the entire industry at the time. I remember going to his funeral, and there was only one person from any of his past employers over the course of his 46 years of living that showed up to his funeral. And they were, and these were people he worked with, he worked over there for 15 years. And I also mentioned was the only one who showed up. It was an awakening, which is, why am I killing myself in this quest for money and climbing the corporate ladder, right? At the end of the day, what really matters, the people who were in that room were family and close friends. And that's what matters. And, you work for a company and God forbid something happens to you, they change the nameplate on the door, dust your seat off, change the profile on the PC and, hire somebody and put them right into the same slot and the machine keeps going. And so, at that point, that's when I said, listen, like this is, it was just a rude awakening. It was like, this is not the way. After he passed away, for about 2.5 years, I had a lot going on, mentally and physically and just, grief and just trying to right the world, right? Trying to put this in its right place and right the world. And during that kind of, personal development process and evolution and going to therapy and talking with folks and praying on it a lot, as well and praying for a lot of different things. And at the end of the day, as long as I got, God and I've got my wife and my children and my family, my mother and my brothers, aunts, uncles, that's at the end, that's all I really need. And those are my priorities. And so, I've tried to be very, very disciplined about living a life that reflects that. And that says, I won't miss certain activities. I won't miss activities that my kids participate in due to work. I just won't. It's just not, and not saying I don't like my job and I don't value it, but prioritize my children and God over that. And so,
sorry, that's just the thing, right? Is like the way this conversation started is very clear that you have many things that provide a deep sense of meaning. You do truly enjoy the work you do and the projects that you're involved in. And we talked about this, I think, really like kind of visceral sense of volition and motivation that comes from a desire to contribute. And at the same time, you're also saying like you've kind of hit a point in your life where you realize that it matters. It's important, but it's maybe not necessarily all it's cracked up to be. And there are other things more important. So my natural question is to get sort of into the brass tacks. How do you go about that? What are your strategies or mechanisms? You mentioned like you don't want to miss a sports practice or a sports game for your kids or something along those lines. I imagine you have to take certain approaches with your work at Lenovo or other places, say like, hey, here are my guardrails. The word we would use is boundaries, right? How do you manage to balance is the wrong word probably, but really like synergize a lot of these priorities in your life?
Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head, Nick, which is you got to set boundaries, right? I have to set boundaries. And I tell people all the time, I'm a very big on a schedule. And I like to set boundaries. And when I'm there, I'm 100% in, I'm all in, right? But when I'm not there, I'm all out. Right. I don't straddle.
Turn it on, turn it off.
Yeah. When it's time for me to work, the day job, right. I'm all in, right. I'm all Lenovo all day. When in the evenings, when I'm working on, when I'm in a meeting for, Resilient Ventures, I'm all in, right. I'm hyper focused. I'm zeroed in and I want to maximize that time where I'm focused on that activity. When I'm with my kids, I am all in. Move distractions until I focus on my children. I focus on time with my family. When it's dinner time, I don't miss dinner. Right. I'm all in. I'm there. We're talking, like not being distracted. I really try to hyper focus on what I'm doing to maximize my time because I know that, I got to work 8 hours a day. Right. Like that's minimum. That's standard. I put my kids to sleep every night. That's just something I won't compromise for. Right. I put my kids to sleep every night. And when I do it, I'm focused. And then once they're asleep, then I can say, okay, well, let me go back and focus on work. Let me go focus on ideating for Shipley Alumni Council or answering emails for, for the Minority Alumni Advisory Board or doing a number of things. But whatever I decide to do, I'm going to be all in on that. And then I say, okay, I usually go to bed around 11:30, sometimes midnight, and then I shut it down. I try to focus on getting some quality sleep, right, for, 7 to 8 hours, right? So I'm all in there. I take magnesium. Like I do things that actually allow me to maximize the amount of quality sleep I can get so I can be at my best the next day to perform.
Have those things, you hit the nail on the head with sleep. I think people really sort of underestimate, a lot of times when I'm working with clients, it's one of the first things I ask. It's kind of like, hey, we're designed to spend a third of our lives doing this thing. It's probably pretty important. So, I mean, what you're really, I think, talking about the peak performance language is active recovery, right? When you're you're in deep, you're crushing it, probably lots of experiences of flow. 2 episodes ago, we had on Stephen Kotler talking a lot about flow. And also when you're off, you're off. I'm curious, was this sort of like binary nature, binary approach pretty natural for you, or is it something you've had to work at? And if you have had to work at it, what's that process been like?
I've had to work, and it really started, honestly, when I started having children. When I became a father, I realized I was talking to, I remember a conversation distinctly with a buddy of mine from college, David Giles, and we met up for lunch. We were chatting, and I was just about to have my first. But anyhow, he had children at the time, and he was talking. He said, children have made me so much more efficient in life. He was like, you get that 45-minute window while they're napping, you maximize the hell out of that 45-minute window. You do more. Like, I do more stuff in 45 minutes now as a father than I did in 45 minutes as a single person. And so I didn't really understand that until I started having children. And that's when I was like, in order for me to be the most effective present father, I have to make sure that if I feel unfulfilled or I feel like I'm off center in one part of my life, it's going to spill over to other parts. So if I don't feel like I'm on base, and this is something I struggle with, I don't have it perfect. I don't want people to believe that like I'm perfect and I've got this.
Yeah, it's a process. It's a process. Yeah, it's tough.
And you refine and you tweak. If I really zero in on work and I accomplish things and I can concretely look back on the work day and say, I got X, Y, and Z done, it makes me a better father. And if I can look back on the day and say, I got to spend time with my kids and during a weekend or even a weekday, I got to, spend time with my kids, talk with them, eat dinner, yada, yada, so forth and so on. It makes me a better employee or a better, volunteer, right? And so, again, I'm not perfect. There are many days where I don't have a day at work and I'm not as efficient, but I try to reflect and learn from that. I try to take time on the weekends and idle time, taking a shower or some meditative time. And this goes more to your question earlier, I guess, about self-care. It takes a meditative time to reflect and say, okay, how can I be better, right? How can I be better? Like, what could I have done better this time? And then there's some days where I hit that flow and man, I'm like, I understand the day and I'm like, I got this done. It's exactly what I'm going to get done here. I got all this done for this, like, just like perfect day. I got things done, right. And in the right way and everything kind of flowed. So yeah, so it's an ongoing kind of, reflective process.
It sounds a lot, just writing down some notes here. It sounds a lot like you really try to focus on what we would call unitasking, like the simple idea that the brain really doesn't multitask conscious activities, right? Like you can do some habitual things while you're doing something that's complex. I shouldn't say conscious, complex activities. And, it's a long way of saying, like, if we try to multitask, usually you're going to see a decrease in performance and an increase in the length of time that thing takes. And it sounds like what you're saying is you get zeroed in on one thing, you try to knock that out, and then you stack those sort of singular wins throughout a day or a given week.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's what I try to do.
How do you zero in? Has it always been, are you, we might say like really flow capable? Have you always been somebody that can focus really easily, or has that been something that you?
A great question. No. I remember Dr. Bush was always telling me, like, Dr. Bush would always see me running on Shipley, like, running around, but like, going from here to there, doing my free periods. He's like, Aki, why are you not sitting down doing work? I mean, most people days would tell you, hell no, Aki didn't focus, right? Like, it wasn't a natural thing for me, right? Like, I was, I think as I've matured and gotten older, it's become easier again, because for some reason, as you get older, the days get shorter and the amount of work you got to do and the amount of things you got to achieve the scope gets broader, and you realize, hey, there's only 24 hours in a day. I got to sleep for 8 of those. And I got a lot to accomplish. So I need to be much more focused if I want to hit goals, right? So it's kind of that blend of purpose and being goal driven meshed with the restrictions of just, time and life. And so, for me, one of the things I really like to do is I like to put on ambient sound, sound. So when I'm working, I will often turn my phone or my iPad on Spotify and just have ambient sound or like spa music. Or spa, I don't even call it music, but spa music on. Deep focus music is a great playlist on Spotify I like to listen to, and it really helps me to zone in. So other strategies that I use, I really like to, ideally, my days are sometimes very, very stacked back to back with meetings and so forth. But another technique I like to use is kind of taking like a 3 to 5 minute window to really kind of set myself mentally kind of center myself for the next task or the next meeting or the next call, what have you. Because to your earlier point around task switching, your brain needs some time. There's plenty of studies that say, multitasking is there's no such thing, it's inefficient. And even task switching, your brain needs time to readjust. And so for me, I try to use, when I can, a 3 to 5 minute period to kind of center myself for the next big meeting or big task or call or what have you. So that way I can operate at peak performance if possible, right? So those are some of the techniques I use throughout the day.
Yeah, those liminal moments, those sort of transitional moments, those are really, really ripe for distractibility as well.
Yes.
So like you said, just mentally making a transition and saying, okay, I'm leaving this behind and I'm moving into this new thing without necessarily grabbing the phone, checking email, popping on social, answering text, whatever it might be, because those things will derail you really quick. And
it's hard, man. I'm going to be honest with you. It's hard, right? It is very hard because, like you said, you got your phone there. You want to check, let me check my stock portfolio. Let me check my email. Let me check, Facebook real quick or Instagram and see if anything popped up, right? And those, I tell people often, I feel like the cell phone has taken away. And I believe there's studies on this where, the brain needs those downtime moments, all right? And the cell phone has taken away those downtime moments. And there's actually an impact on brain development and brain function because we're not giving our brain those moments to kind of decompress. And I know you probably know all about this, Nick, because this is your field of study. But one of the things I heard or I've read is that time spent on the elevator used to be a time where people could you get on an elevator, you just have your stack of papers, you be going to another meeting. And even that 30-second elevator ride was a chance for your brain to kind of rest and flip switches and prepare for the next task in hand. And now when we get on an elevator, it's like, I'm going to elevator my phone. Your brain is still being stimulated, right? And they were saying even that short period of time, the fact that we use our phones is really, it's not good.
Yeah, there's some great TED Talks and research on this, and I got to be careful here because I'm going to dovetail into a series of studies really that's kind of under what we call the replication crisis. It revolves around willpower, but essentially my understanding is that when we task switch or try to multitask, and we're not really multitasking, we're switching back and forth really quickly, what's happening there is that's draining the brain of its reserves of glucose. And there is a line of research that suggests that our levels of glucose are highly associated with our willpower. So it's a long way of saying when we don't give ourselves downtime to be bored or let the brain rest or make those transitions, what we're actually doing is kind of setting ourselves up throughout the course of a day to be less able to regulate our cognition, our emotion, our behavior, things of that nature. So that you're absolutely right. That downtime is really, really critical.
Yeah, it's critical.
So I want to be respectful of your time. This was a really, really wonderful conversation. You're doing so many amazing things, and I commend you. And how can people reach out to you if they maybe want to learn more or potentially support some of your endeavors? Where can people reach out to find you if they want to maybe kind of get involved with some of the council work that you do? Or you mentioned sort of the VC work around Black entrepreneurs and things of that nature. Is there a way for people to get in touch with you? Social, email, website, anything like that?
Yes. So I'm on every social platform that is age appropriate. So I'm not on TikTok. I'm not on Snapchat.
Yeah.
But I'm on Facebook. I am on Facebook, Akinwole Garrett. I'm on Instagram, Akis215. That's where I'm a little more fun.
Yeah,
see the fun Aki. And then from a professional standpoint, obviously on LinkedIn, Akinwole Garrett on LinkedIn. Would love to connect with folks. Anybody that's passionate about these things, the things that I do, or share kind of similar interest, or are aspiring to kind of get into some of the spaces that I operate in. Happy to chat with younger, Shipley alums, or folks in general that want to kind of get into these spaces. I find them very rewarding, as you can tell by now, and always happy to lend
awesome.
a word of advice for helping out.
Awesome. We'll put all those links to those various accounts in the show notes for this episode. That's great. So Aki, it was really great chatting with you. Thanks for the time this morning.
Thank you, Nick. It was really, really good to chat with you as well.
Our show is produced by the Shipley School, an independent pre-K through grade 12 day school, rethinking education and daring to hope that we can, in fact, build a better future. Come on and join us.